The jet bridge door slammed shut between her and the aisle of the plane, and the sound was so sharp it made the windows hum for a heartbeat, and every face that had turned to watch stayed turned as if the whole airport had frozen mid-breath. The flight attendant who had raised her hand did not raise her voice. She used that clipped calm that says the decision is final and said this passenger is non-compliant. "Step back, please." And the words non-compliant hung in the air like a cold tag. On warm skin, she stepped back because two uniformed ground staff were already moving toward her, and because the white cardboard box in her arms needed both hands if she wanted to keep it steady and safe, and because the camera above the gate had a little red light that blinked like a judgmental eye. A murmur rolled from the cabin inside the plane. Someone whispered, "Just let her sit down." Someone else said, "Policy is policy." And a man in a business jacket lifted his phone and pretended not to film while absolutely filming, and the flight attendant looked over Amara's shoulder to the gate agent, as if to say, "Your turn now." Amara breathed in the recycled chill of the terminal and made her voice level. "I am seated in 12A. My bag is stowed." There I followed every instruction she said, and her fingers tightened around the edges of the box that held what the airline would have called special contents if it had been tagged by them, and not by her hands, the night before. The gate agent did not meet her eyes. She looked at the scanner instead and said the flight is departing, and we have the right to refuse carriage for any reason, including non-compliance with crew directives. Please step aside, and her badge lanyard knocked against the desk like a tiny bell with every word. Non-compliance, Amara repeated, and the words scraped her throat. I buckled when told. I powered down when told. I asked a question about the white box, and the attendant told me to put it under my feet. I said I could not, and I showed the letter, and then she said, "Get off this aircraft," and called me a problem. The attendant spoke without looking at her. "The captain has made a determination, and the decision is final." "What determination?" Amara asked, and the answer was a glance past her at the security guard now arriving, and the confidence of someone sure the system was lined up behind her like aircraft on a runway. Waiting for takeoff, passengers shifted in their seats inside the plane, hungry for movement, ready to leave the awkward moment behind. A child asked a soft question. A mother hushed. A couple across the aisle leaned toward each other and shared a look that said, "Poor girl," and also, "Thank God. It is not us." Amara looked at the glass wall where the wings of another plane threw light across the polished floor. She counted an even breath and another and said, "Then give me back my seat, give me my bag, please open the door and let me retrieve it." "We cannot open the door again," the gate agent said, and the scanner chimed an impatient denial. "The doors are closed, you will be rebooked." Rebooked into when Amara asked, "Today is not optional for me," and her eyes flicked to the white box and then away. Security stepped closer, and the terminal speakers chirped with a boarding announcement for another flight somewhere else far away from this small stage, and the flight attendant folded her arms in a way that said, "The scene is over." A man who had been watching from the corner walked forward and snapped, "I saw what happened. She did nothing wrong. You asked her to put the box under the seat, and she said it was an urn," and the attendant cut him off with a raised hand. "Sir, please step back. It is not an urn," Amara said, though it might as well have been. "It is a sealed box from a hospital lab, and it is not going under my feet." And she heard the tremor in her own voice, and made it still by force, and the tremor moved to her fingers. Instead, a small quake under the skin. The gate agent lifted a printed paper like a shield. "The decision has been made. You are being denied boarding for crew interference and non-compliance. Please proceed to the service desk. Crew interference." The words landed like gravel, and something in the way the attendant avoided her eyes told a longer story that no one wanted to say out loud. Amara looked down at the boarding door seam where a thin ribbon of light traced the floor. She did not cry. She did not beg. She only set the box gently on the counter and reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and pulled out a flat envelope with a blue stripe and a small silver seal. The gate agent blinked. "What is that authority to carry special contents under compassionate exemption?" Amara said, and she slid the envelope across the counter. "It is signed by your corporate risk office and by airport operations and by the lab that issued this box. I gave a copy to the lead attendant during boarding. She refused to read it and called me difficult. The flight attendant shifted her stance. I said I would ask the captain. She answered, then smiled thin and added, and the captain said no. You did not take the letter to the captain, Amara said, and her voice had the low calm of someone who had put their anger on a leash. You folded it and slid it into a pocket and walked away. Security cleared his throat. Ma'am, we need to move you along. Amara studied the seal on the envelope as if it were a compass needle, and then she took back the paper, slid it into her pocket, again, and lifted the white box into her arms. She looked at the clock over the gate and marked the time because the time mattered. She told herself the time would be part of the story later. 7 minutes, she thought, and she said it under her breath. Not a promise, not a threat, only a measure of how long it would take to pull every thread that had just been cut. The gate agent glanced over her shoulder through the porthole window at the front galley where the attendant now chatted with another crew member. Her smile bright and easy as if nothing had happened. The agent touched her headset, said something short, then turned back. I will have you rebooked, she said. There is a flight in 4 hours. 4 hours stretched like a desert with no shade. No, thank you, Amara said, and she stepped away from the counter. She stood beside the tall window with the runway beyond and the moving light of taxiing aircraft, and she balanced the box in one arm and with her free hand unlocked her phone. Do not record. Please, the security guard said. I am not recording, Amara answered. She scrolled past the familiar names, the ones that would offer comfort but no power, and tapped the contact labeled control. She had never used it in public. She was not supposed to. Unless the situation required it, she decided this situation qualified. The line clicked and a calm voice answered. Identify. Amara spoke her full name and the reference code from the blue striped envelope. She gave the flight number, the gate, the names on the badges, and the key phrase from the policy that every agent pretends to know and no one is trained to enforce with care. The voice said, stand by. Do not leave the immediate area. Do not escalate. We are moving. She ended the call, and for a breath, she felt nothing, and then heat rose along her neck and jaw, and she tasted metal in her mouth. The taste of swallowed rage. She placed the box on the ledge at the window and pressed her palm flat on its lid as if to ground herself to something that mattered more than all of this theater. Inside the plane, a row of overhead bins snapped shut. The cabin lights dimmed for departure. The business jacket man looked up from his phone toward her through the porthole and held her gaze for a second and lifted 2 fingers in a tiny salute that might have meant I am sorry or you have this or both. The gate agent's scanner beeped again, but this time the beep sounded wrong, like a hiccup. The display flashed a message. The agent frowned, tapped again, frowned deeper. The attendant appeared at her shoulder smiling. Can we go yet? And the agent pointed at the screen. I am getting a ground hold flag. I do not know why. Across the terminal, 3 monitors flickered. The airline logo pulsed and a text banner crawled along the bottom, not to the public but to staff, a code Amara had only ever seen in training and once in a slideshow. And the gate agent swallowed hard and looked at the phone on the desk as it rang with a tone that meant internal priority. She picked up, listened, and her eyes widened. The color left her face, then came back in a rush, flushed and flustered. She nodded too many times and said, yes, sir. Yes, sir, yes. She is here. And her gaze cut to Amara, who stood by the glass with a steady hand on the box and a phone at her side. The station manager came jogging down the concourse, tie-skewed radio clipped to his belt, breath already loud. Before he reached the gate, his voice carried as he said, where is she? And the security guard straightened and stepped aside because the manager did not slow. He simply pointed at the door and snapped, nobody moves that plane. Do not arm the bridge. I want the captain on headset. Now passengers inside the cabin turned as one creature, the long animal of a plane that knows something is wrong. A ripple of attention moving from front to back. A mother sat up straighter. A teenager pressed his face to the window. The business jacket man put his phone down for the first time. The flight attendant looked from the manager to the gate agent to Amara with a confusion that tried to pretend to be calm. What is happening? She asked, and no one answered her because the manager had already reached the glass where Amara stood, and he stopped there and took In the box, the envelope the set of her shoulders, and he said quietly, "Ma'am, what do you need from me right now?" For a second, the question trembled like a bridge in a strong wind. Everything that had been heavy inside her lifted and shifted and settled into a shape she could carry. Amara looked at him and said, "Open the door, retrieve my bag, read the letter, and then apologize to my mother." "Your mother, the manager?" asked, and his eyes flicked to the box and back to her face, and an understanding moved through him that straightened his spine and stripped the theater from his voice. He turned to the gate agent. "Do it now," and the agent nodded, already dialing already, speaking words that sounded like a spell backward cancel pushback. "Hold the door, unlock the bridge," and the speakers chimed across the concourse with a soft tone that meant nothing to most travelers and everything to anyone wearing a badge. The flight attendant took a step forward, her mouth a tight line that tried for confidence and landed on defensiveness. She said, "We followed policy," and the manager held up a hand. "Not now." The jet bridge light switched from red to amber. The lock clacked and released the door handle, hummed, and then clicked again like a second thought, and the manager pressed the intercom for the cockpit. "Captain, we are opening. We have an immediate priority directive. Do not move." The plane sat quiet as a held breath. Amara felt the tremor leave her hands. She knew this was only the first ripple and that the real wave had not yet reached the shore. She picked up the white box and held it close again, and in the glass, she saw her own face reflected calm and stormy at once, and behind her, the whole concourse paused to watch. The manager looked at her phone, still face down on the ledge, still silent for now, and he said softly, "Someone very high up is on the line and wants to speak with you as soon as we get your bag and confirm your seat." She nodded without speaking. The words were not ready yet. She wanted the deed first, the apology. Second, the conversation last. Inside the plane, footsteps approached the door. The handle turned a fraction and stopped as the pressure equalized, a hiss like a long sigh, and then the seal softened. The flight attendant shifted as if to take charge again, and the manager said firmly, "Stand by," and for the first time her confidence faltered. Amara watched the metal latch roll. Back, she thought of the 7 minutes she had promised herself. She thought of what would come next. Not for this one gate, but for every gate this airline owned. And she let the thought fill her chest like new air. The door inched open, and a hand appeared holding a small black roller bag with a bright ribbon tied to the handle. The exact ribbon she had tied last night with careful fingers and a quiet prayer. The bag crossed the threshold into the jet bridge, and the moment stretched thin and electric. And in that stretch, the station radio crackled with a message patched from a number that could make or break any airport in the country. And the manager lifted it to his ear and listened, and his eyes widened again. And then he looked at Amara, not with pity now, but with something like respect and something like caution, and he said one word that tilted the world: "At this gate, ma'am." Then he offered her the radio, and the whole terminal leaned in without moving as she reached for it. The radio felt heavier than it should have for a piece of plastic and wires. It felt as if it carried the weight of hundreds of eyes pressed into her back, and the echo of the attendant's clipped voice still sharp in the air. She pressed it to her ear and said, "This is Amara." The voice on the other end did not belong to a gate agent or a faceless operator. It was smooth, calm, and deliberate. A tone that belonged to someone who had practiced sounding like power and still carried the human edge that made people obey without thinking. The voice said, "Ms. Amara, you have been mishandled. We are aware of the incident and it will be corrected immediately. Please stay where you are." She did not ask who the voice was, because the weight in it told her the answer was higher than anyone she could have requested. She only said, "I want the apology delivered, and I want acknowledgement that my exemption letter is binding on all crews across all flights, not optional, not subject to mood or bias." The voice paused for half a breath, then said, "Understood. The apology will be delivered now and the letter will be logged into permanent policy within the hour. You have my word." Amara looked at the attendant standing stiff by the wall, arms still folded, as if her posture could shield her from the collapse of her authority. The manager gestured with his chin and said softly, "Do it now." And the attendant opened her mouth, then closed it, then forced out words that cracked as they came. "I apologize for removing you from the aircraft. It was wrong. I failed to follow procedure." Passengers leaning toward the window inside. The plane could not hear the words, But they could see the body language, the dropped shoulders, the way Amara did not flinch or bow but stood steady with the white box held close like a relic. The voice on the radio spoke again. "Miss Amara, your seat has been restored, but I understand you may prefer not to continue on this aircraft. If you wish, a private arrangement will be provided." Her first instinct was to refuse because she did not want special treatment. She wanted fairness. She wanted the attendant to feel the sting of being seen. She wanted the airline to know that no one should be stripped of dignity with a phrase like non-compliant. But the second instinct was sharper than pride. She wanted safety for the box, and she wanted speed. "I will take the private arrangement," she said, "not because I am fragile, but because I am carrying something that cannot be delayed. Of course," the voice said, "a vehicle will meet you in 5 minutes. Please remain visible." The radio clicked off, leaving silence so sudden it rang in her ears. The manager cleared his throat and spoke to security softly. "Escort her to gate 9 and stay with her until relieved." The attendant shifted her weight as if she might object, but the manager cut her a look that nailed her to the spot, and she swallowed her words and looked away. As Amara walked down the concourse, passengers craned their necks, some with sympathy, some with curiosity, some with the flat gaze of those who had already turned the event into a story to retell over drinks. She ignored them. She kept her eyes on the windows where planes crawled across the tarmac like patient, metal insects. And she thought of the box, the small, fragile promise inside it, and of her mother waiting in another city with hope like a flame cupped between her hands. At gate 9, a black vehicle was waiting beyond the glass. Low, sleek, tinted, the kind of car that only appeared when rules bent around influence. Security held the door open. The driver stepped out in uniform and nodded without speaking. She followed because resistance would have been pride without purpose, and purpose mattered more now. The car door shut and the world outside dimmed to a hush. She set the box on her lap and ran her fingers over the seal. The driver glanced at her in the mirror, his eyes respectful, not probing, and said, "We will be airborne within 30 minutes. The aircraft is prepared exclusively for you." She had flown private only once before, and that time it had not been luxury. It had been necessity. A medical evacuation with her mother's breath shallow and the night pressing in. This time, the stakes felt higher because the box contained more than tissue and sample. It contained the last bridge between a life lost and a chance not yet gone. Her phone buzzed. She unlocked it and saw messages flooding in, strangers tagging her name, video clips already moving across networks, the moment of her removal recorded from 3 angles, captions burning across the screen like verdicts thrown off a plane. Denied for being difficult, non-compliant while holding a white box. She scrolled past the noise and found one message that froze her, a short line from an unknown number that read, "They wanted you silenced." Her breath snagged. She read it again. "They wanted you silenced." She looked at the number, untraceable. She closed the screen and pressed the phone flat against the box as if to bind the words away, but they burrowed under her skin. The vehicle stopped by a hangar door that rolled open on command. Inside, a sleek jet waited, stairs down, engines humming. The air smelled of jet fuel and urgency. She carried the box herself up the steps, ignoring the offer of the pilot who reached for it. She did not want any hands on it but her own. The cabin was quiet. Leather seats arranged in pairs, a table set with untouched glasses, the kind of luxury that felt obscene when paired with the pounding in her chest. She sat near the window, cradling the box as the engines rose to a steady roar. The pilot announced, "Wheels up in 5 minutes. Please remain seated," and the words "wheels up" spun in her mind like a mantra: liftoff, rise, escape. Her phone buzzed again, this time, a call she almost let it ring out, but the number was one she knew, one she had not seen in years. She answered, and the voice was strained, low, urgent. "Amara, it is me. You need to understand. This is bigger than one flight. They knew who you were before you boarded." Her throat tightened. "Who is they?" The line cracked, then cleared a breath. Then the voice said, "Corporate security mixed with government contracts. The airline is just a surface. They did not want the box to reach its destination." The floor seemed to tilt, though the plane had not yet moved. Her fingers clenched the box tighter. "What is in here that they fear?" The voice hesitated long enough to tell her the truth was dangerous, then said, "Not just tissue. Not just sample inside is a code sequence tied to an identity, and that identity threatens people with power. If it reaches the lab, it rewrites liability. If it reaches the court, it rewrites history." She looked at the seal. On the box, her heart drumming like fists on a locked door, she whispered, "They tried to erase it." "Yes," the voice said, "they will try again. You must decide if you will carry it through and face them, or if you will turn back. Because once you land with that box, the war begins." The line went dead. The pilot called from the cockpit, cleared for departure, and the engines surged. The plane rolled. Amara closed her eyes for one long breath, and then opened them steady. She thought of her mother, of the truth in the box, of the attendant's smirk, of the stranger's filming, of the apology forced out like broken glass. She thought of the unknown number, and the voice that warned her. She thought of survival and revenge and healing braided together like strands of the same rope. As the jet lifted nose up, wheels leaving ground, Amara felt the weight of the box shift slightly, as if gravity itself were uncertain, as if the universe held its breath. She tightened her grip and whispered to herself, "You tried to silence me, but I am airborne now." The city fell away beneath her lights, shrinking roads, curling rivers shining like steel threads. The sky opened and the horizon stretched wide, and the box in her arms seemed to pulse with meaning. 7 minutes ago, she had been just another passenger, denied and humiliated. Now she was a carrier of something that could break or heal the world, depending on who claimed it. She pressed her cheek to the lid and felt the cool metal against her skin. She let the fear and the rage and the grief roll through her, without stopping them. She let them sharpen into focus. She knew this was only part 2 of a story that would demand everything from her, but for the first time she felt that the power was no longer only in their hands. It was in hers too. And when the jet broke through the cloud layer into clear night sky, she whispered a vow. Not to the airline, not to the attendant, not even to herself, but to the silent box. She carried a vow. The cabin lights dimmed as the jet steadied above the clouds. The hum of the engines softened into a low, steady rhythm like a heartbeat, and Amara finally allowed herself to lean back in the seat. With the box still balanced across her lap, she felt the vibration through her palms, a reminder that the only thing keeping her in the air was machinery and trust, and both of those could fail. The pilot's voice came through the speaker, smooth and professional. "We are at cruising altitude. Estimated time to destination is 2 hours. Weather ahead is clear. Please remain comfortable." Comfortable. The word felt like mockery because comfort was impossible when a single box weighed more than the whole plane. She looked out the oval window at the sweep of night, the horizon glowing faintly with the curve of the earth. The stars scattered sharp and distant, and she thought about the message that had cut through her before they wanted you silenced. She opened her phone again, though she had promised herself not to chase the words down rabbit holes. The messages were multiplying. Clips of her confrontation at the gate had already gathered thousands of views. Headlines that twisted facts into hooks were being shared. Passenger removed for defiance. Young woman claims discrimination. Mysterious box sparks airline chaos. Her name trending like fire on dry grass. Her thumb hovered over one clip she pressed. Play a stranger's voice whispering, "She is being kicked off for carrying that box. Look at her face. She is terrified. This is wrong." And then the video ended, cut short by another voice calling the attendant a liar. The comment thread scrolled faster than she could read. Some voices defending her, some mocking her, some demanding investigation, some demanding silence. She turned the screen off and placed the phone face down on the table. Her eyes returned to the box. She whispered to it as if it could answer, "Tell me what you are worth. Tell me why they fear you." The seal on the lid glinted silver under the cabin light, and for a moment she imagined it pulsing faintly, as if alive. She shook the thought away and reminded herself that inside were samples, records, sequences, data that could not breathe, and yet could still decide who had the right to live freely and who would be buried under lies. The pilot called back through the intercom again. "Ms. Amara, we have been instructed to divert for a short landing stop. Nothing to worry about, just refuel and resume." Her heart jolted. "No, she said sharply through the mic at her seat. No diversions, no delays. The pilot hesitated. The request came from higher up. He explained. I was told to comply. Her pulse thudded. Higher up meant the same network of hands that had tried to erase her in the terminal, meant the shadow wrapped around the airline like vines choking a tree. She pressed the intercom button with a force that made her finger ache and said, Override code, blue stripe, 7-0 denial of diversion silence. Then a clipped acknowledgement. Yes, ma'am, holding course. Her breath came hard and fast, and she realized her grip had tightened on the box so fiercely her knuckles ached. She forced herself to loosen hold, but only slightly. The door to the cockpit opened, and the co-pilot stepped out. Young face tense, eyes alert. He approached with caution. Ms. Amara, we were told to reassure you we are loyal to our assignment. We will not let interference harm you, but you. Need to know a second aircraft has taken off behind us? They may not be friendly. Her stomach twisted. Second aircraft following not friendly words that sounded like fiction, but here above the clouds every fiction had the teeth of truth, she asked. How much time until they reach us? The co-pilot said less than an hour. She closed her eyes for a long beat, then opened them again, clear and steady. What happens if they force us to land? The co-pilot glanced at the box, then at her. His answer was a whisper that cut colder than the cabin air. Then the box will never reach its lab. Her jaw locked. She looked out the window again, the stars unchanged, uncaring her reflection, staring back at her with eyes that no longer looked soft or uncertain, but sharp with something harder than anger. She whispered to the reflection, They will not take it. The co-pilot lingered as if he wanted to say more, then retreated to the cockpit. She sat alone with the box again, the hum of the engines no longer soothing, but ominous like a countdown. Her phone buzzed. Another call, another unknown number. She almost ignored it, but then answered with a voice flat and guarded, and the caller said, So calm, so familiar, you cannot outrun this forever. Amara, better to hand it over than to burn with it. Her breath caught. Who are you? She demanded. The voice chuckled low and dangerous. Someone who knows what you carry, someone who knows it does not belong to you. She clenched her teeth. It belongs to the truth. The voice shifted. Harder. Then you will not survive the landing if you keep it. The line went dead, and she sat frozen, the words burrowing deep, her heartbeat a hammer in her chest. The jet trembled, a small shake. The first brush of turbulence. The pilot announced rough air ahead, but her gut told her it was not weather. It was shadow closing in. She pressed her hand flat against the lid of the box and whispered again. Not to herself this time, but to the memory of her mother waiting on the other end. I will not let them erase you. The plane dipped, then steadied. Her breath caught, then settled, and she knew the night was only beginning to test her. She sat straighter, braced herself for the storm still coming, and let the silence stretch into resolve. Because in this moment, Amara knew she was no longer just a passenger. She was a carrier of something that could either set the world free or keep it chained forever. And if they wanted to silence her, they would have to tear the sky open to do it. The hum of the engines deepened as the jet cut through darker clouds, and the stars above blurred behind thin veils of mist. The cockpit door opened again, and the pilot himself stepped out. His uniform crisp, but his face grave. He stood in the aisle steady, despite the slight tremor in the air, and looked at Amara directly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Ms. Amara. They are closing in. She sat up straighter, her fingers curling protectively around the white box. What do you mean, closing in? She asked. Though she already felt the answer in her chest, radar shows an approach. The pilot said, no transponder code, no commercial flight plan, which means they are either military under sealed orders or private under false clearance. Either way, they have us on intercept within 20 minutes. Her mind spun. 20 minutes meant less than the time it took to watch one news broadcast, less than the time it took her to eat breakfast. 20 minutes was nothing, and yet enough to change everything. Forever. She asked, if they force us down, what happens? The pilot's jaw tightened. If we land under their control, the box is gone, and maybe so are we. The box felt heavier in her lap, as if it had absorbed every word. Amara looked at the pilot's eyes. They were steady like a man who had been through storms before, and she said, then we cannot let them land us. He gave a quick nod, returned to the cockpit, and the door sealed again. She could hear muffled commands, rapid exchanges, the mechanical reassurance of buttons clicked and levers adjusted. She sat rigid in her seat, eyes locked on the window, as though she could see the enemy closing through the night. Her phone buzzed again, this time, not with a call, but with a flood of notifications. A video had gone viral. The clip of her holding the white box at the gate, her refusal to back down, the forced apology from the attendant, edited with music and captions. Her name plastered across headlines, some calling her a hero, some calling her a liar, some painting her as a symbol, some as a threat. She scrolled through comments, the words swirling: betrayal, strength, racism, revenge, justice, cover up. The world was watching now, and that meant she was no longer invisible. But visibility was a blade that cut both ways. The cabin lights flickered. The jet tilted, a fraction turbulence, but sharper than before. She heard the shift in engine pitch as the pilots forced a climb to higher altitude. She gripped the armrest and whispered, "Steady, steady," like she was speaking to the plane itself. Minutes stretched long and taut until the cockpit door cracked open again. The co-pilot leaned out, his eyes tight. "We have them in sight." Small jet painted. "Dark, they are trailing, lights off," he said, his voice taut with nerves. "They are signaling us to reduce speed." Amara stood gripping the box, her legs shaking from the vibration underfoot. She moved closer to the cockpit door, speaking through the gap. Into the captain's space: "Do not slow. Do not land." The pilot's reply came firm. "Already decided, not an option, ma'am." The jet lurched as if nudged from outside the cabin, tilted, and passengers that might have been relaxed in a normal flight would have gasped. But here the only passenger was Amara, and her breath caught in her chest. Her phone rang again. Another unknown number. She answered with a snap, and the same calm, dangerous voice filled her ear. "You cannot outrun authority forever, hand it over and walk away, or you will not touch ground alive." Her voice cracked with fury. "You are afraid of the truth, that is why you chase me." The voice chuckled. "Truth is a weapon, and weapons must be controlled. We cannot let someone like you carry it. You are nothing but a courier, disposable." Her rage burned away the fear. "Disposable," she repeated in a whisper, as if tasting the word, then louder into the phone. "If I am nothing, then why are you chasing me with planes?" The line went dead again, but the answer was already clear. The cockpit door shut and locked. The engines roared louder as the jet pushed harder. Amara held the box tighter, and for a fleeting moment she closed her eyes and thought of her mother. She imagined her waiting at the other, and watching the clock, believing her daughter would walk through the arrival gate holding the one thing that could clear the shadows that had haunted their family for years. The plane jolted again, a sharp roll to the left. Amara slammed into the side panel, pain shooting through her shoulder, but she did not drop the box. She would never drop it. The co-pilot's voice came through the intercom. "They are trying to force us down, but we are resisting. Stand by." Her heart pounded. Stand by meant danger, but also meant defiance. She gritted her teeth and shouted into the cabin, "Hold steady. Do not let them win." The engine screamed with effort. The lights dimmed, then steadied. The jet clawed for altitude, the hostile plane matching it like a predator, pacing prey through the night. For a breath there was silence. Then the pilot's voice, firm, clear. Not to her, but to the unseen pursuers. "This aircraft is protected under federal clearance. Disengage immediately, or risk escalation." No answer came, only the heavy presence of the second jet still shadowing them, still pushing. Amara looked down at the white box, and for the first time she realized it was not only a burden, it was leverage, it was power. It was the reason powerful people feared a single woman sitting in a cabin above the clouds. She pressed her forehead against the cool lid and whispered, "If they want you so badly, then you must be worth more than their threats." The cockpit intercom clicked again. "Ms. Amara," the captain said, "we are being given clearance to use emergency protocol. Do you authorize?" Her pulse surged. Emergency protocol meant drastic measures. It meant putting faith in a system that had already betrayed her, but she also knew doing nothing meant surrender. She answered, with a voice that shook but did not falter, "Yes, authorize, do it." The jet tilted nose, higher engines flaring, the entire cabin vibrating with force. Amara held onto the box with all her strength, whispering through clenched teeth, "Over and over you. Will not take this from me." Below the clouds, far behind the lights of the hostile jet, flickered and strained to keep pace. But Amara's craft surged forward, pulled by desperation, pulled by authority, pulled by the raw will of survival, and the truth, locked inside a small white box. The sky ahead stretched open, vast, dark, endless. And in that dark she felt a spark of hope, like the first glimmer of dawn. And though the storm had not passed, she knew the fight was far from over. She was still in the air, still unbroken, still carrying the truth toward a world waiting below. The jet screamed through the clouds, the sound of engines filling the cabin like a living roar. Amara pressed her back hard against the seat, the white box locked between her arms as if her heartbeat was inside it. Her breath came shallow but steady, her eyes fixed on the window where the night stretched infinite and hostile. The cockpit intercom crackled, the captain's voice urgent. "Miss Amara, they are not giving up. They are accelerating. They will attempt to cut us off before descent into controlled airspace." Her pulse thudded like a drum against her ribs. "What happens if they cut us off?" she shouted back, and the answer came cold and matter of fact. "Then we will not reach your destination." Her throat tightened. Her hands gripped the box so hard her fingers burned, but she forced her voice level. "Then we find another way to land, and we do it now." The plane shuddered, a heavy jolt as if struck. Amara slammed against the armrest, teeth biting into her lip, the metallic taste of blood filling her mouth. The co-pilot's voice sharp. "They are brushing us, forcing turbulence. Hold on." She held tighter, her body aching, but her grip on the box never loosening. She whispered, through clenched teeth, "You will not take it from me, not in the sky, not anywhere." Her phone buzzed again on the table, a new unknown number. She almost ignored it, but instinct said answer, and when she did, the voice was not mocking or cruel this time. It was low, trembling, and familiar. It was the same voice that had warned her earlier. The insider, the ghost. "Amara, listen to me. You are almost out of time. They are going to try to disable your aircraft. They cannot let you land, because once you land, the contents of that box will be in hands that cannot be controlled." Her throat tightened. "Tell me exactly what is inside." The voice hesitated, then said, "It is not only tissue and sequence, it is identity. The genetic code of someone they tried to erase. It proves not only heritage, but ownership of assets, rights to patents, rights to land, rights to billions. It proves your mother's line was never broken. And if that truth reaches daylight, entire corporations crumble." Amara felt her chest collapse, then surge with fire. "So that is why they tried to silence her," she whispered. "Because my mother's blood is their ruin." "Yes," the voice said, "and yours too. You are part of this legacy." The line went dead again, leaving her alone with a storm inside her. But now the storm had clarity. Now she knew the weight she carried was not just for her family, but for every name stolen, every story buried. The cockpit door burst open, the co-pilot's face pale. "They fired a flare across our nose," he shouted. "Warning. Shot next one will not be a warning." Her heart slammed, the pilot's voice from behind him. "Hold tight, initiating evasive." The jet rolled hard. Amara felt gravity vanish, then slam back, her body flung sideways. The box nearly wrenched from her grip, screamed a sound of fury, not fear, and clutched it tighter. The cabin lights flickered, the overhead compartments rattled, though empty. The hostile jet flashed past the window, black shadow against darker sky, then curved upward, banking like a hawk. Circling prey, Amara pressed her forehead against the box, whispering again and again, "You will not break me. You will not break us." The co-pilot staggered back to the cockpit and the door slammed shut. The engine screamed louder than before, fighting. Gravity fighting shadow. Amara closed her eyes and thought of her mother's face, lined with both pain and hope, waiting in another city, waiting for proof that the past had not been stolen forever. The intercom snapped again, captain's voice hard. "Clipped, Ms. Amara. We have one chance to break free. We will dive through turbulence and drop into restricted airspace. They will not follow without risking exposure, but the dive will be violent." "Do it," she shouted over the noise. "Whatever it takes, do it." The plane tilted nose down. Gravity crashed her into the seat, pressure forcing tears from her eyes. The box crushed tight against her chest. The air roared. The cabin rattled, metal groaning like it might tear apart, her vision blurred. But she did not let go. She would never let go. The dive lasted seconds that felt like centuries. Then suddenly the engines leveled. The cabin steadied and the night outside shifted from clear black sky to thick storm clouds, lightning flashing across the wings, the hostile jet nowhere in sight. The captain's voice came again, breathless but firm. We shook them off. We are inside restricted zone. They will not pursue from here. Amara gasped, chest burning, but her lips curved into the first real smile since the ordeal began. She whispered into the box. We are still here. We are still flying. But the victory was brief because her phone buzzed one final time. A message this time, not a call. The screen lighting with words that made her blood run cold. I think you won. But the ground is ours. Her chest froze. Her eyes lifted to the window where the storm outside flashed violent and bright. She realized the fight was not finished above the clouds. It was only moving below. She pressed the box tighter, her mind burning with one truth: no matter what waited on the ground, she would face it because the legacy inside the box had survived this far, and it would not die now. The engines droned steady, the descent beginning, the storm raging like fire outside, and Amara sat with her heart pounding, her body aching, and her spirit hard as steel, whispering to the night, "Try to stop me again. I dare you," because she knew the final battle would not be in the sky, but on the ground where the shadows waited to claim her and the truth she carried. The storm howled outside the cabin as the jet descended. Lightning split the clouds and thunder rolled across the wings like the growl of a beast. Amara sat stiff, her arms locked around the white box, her eyes unblinking because she knew the true battle waited below. The intercom crackled, the captain's voice low and tense. "Miss Amara, we have clearance to land, but ground control is compromised. We are receiving conflicting instructions. One tells us to taxi to a secure hangar. Another orders us to reroute to an isolated bay. I need to know where you want us to go." Her chest tightened. Both options sounded like traps. She closed her eyes for a breath, then whispered to herself, "Remember what is at stake. Remember Mother's face. Remember the promise." She lifted her head and said through the mic, "Take us to the secure hangar. Do not let them separate me from this box." The jet shuddered as wheels met. Runway, the screech of rubber on asphalt sharp in her ears. The engines reversed. Thrust. The cabin jolted forward, then steadied. Silence followed, broken only by the patter of rain against the fuselage. The cockpit door opened. The co-pilot gestured. "Hurry, ma'am. We cannot hold long." Amara stood, legs trembling from hours of fear and strain, but her grip on the box unbroken. She stepped into the aisle and toward the stairs, lowered to the wet tarmac. The night air hit her cold, sharp, carrying the scent of fuel and storm, and she saw them, two groups waiting, one near the secure hangar marked with official vehicles, lights flashing, another near the isolated bay in plain vans, dark windows, engines idling. The co-pilot leaned close. "Those vans are not ours." Amara nodded. Throat tight, she stepped down into the rain, holding the box close as if it were her heartbeat splashing through puddles. Her eyes fixed on the hangar where uniformed officers motioned urgently. "This way, ma'am. This way." A shout rose from the other, side figures spilling from the vans, voices cutting through the storm stop. Her now she has it. Her heart lurched. She broke into a run, the rain blurring her vision, her legs burning with each step, her arms straining under the weight of the box, but she did not slow. She could not slow. One figure from the vans lunged forward, reaching. She twisted away, nearly stumbling, her shoulder slamming into his arm, but she kept running. A hand grabbed her sleeve, fabric tearing. She yanked free the box. Never. Leaving her grip, a scream tore from her throat, raw and defiant. "You will not take this from me." Hands reached from the hangar, pulling her in, closing ranks around her. The doors rolling shut behind the security lights, harsh and white, cutting across the rain as the van figures pounded against the metal, too late. Inside the hangar, calm replaced chaos. Men and women in official uniforms. Saluted. One stepped forward, tall, steady voice carrying authority. "Ms. Amara, we have been expecting you, please. Hand over the contents for verification. Her knees shook, her body screaming with exhaustion, but her voice steady. She lifted the box onto the table and peeled away the seal with shaking hands. The lid opened with a soft hiss, revealing rows of vials. Papers, data, drives, everything intact, untouched, shining under the light like fragments of truth made visible. The officer studied them, then turned to her, eyes serious. "You have no idea what you have just delivered. This will change everything." Amara's throat tightened. "I know enough to understand they tried to bury it and they tried to bury me, but they failed." The officer nodded, his voice softer. "You carried the legacy of your bloodline, and you carried the proof of crimes too vast to count you. May have saved more than your family tonight. You may have saved history itself." Her knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the table, tears mixing with rain on her face, not of weakness but of release of something heavier than any box finally lifted. She whispered to the memory of her mother. "We did it. We made them see." The officer placed a hand on her shoulder, firm, steady. "You will need protection. They will not stop easily, but you are no longer alone. The world is watching, and the truth cannot be hidden now." She exhaled, shuddering, a sound between sob and laugh. She looked at the box open and bare and said softly, "Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are. And in this moment I found us." The storm outside raged, but inside the hangar there was calm, a quiet that felt like dawn, and Amara stood drenched, trembling but unbroken, knowing the journey had scarred her, knowing the war was not over, but also knowing that for the first time in years, she had won. And as the lights glared down on her and the box that had carried not just samples, but hope, Amara let herself breathe deeply and whispered the words that closed the story and opened another, the end and the beginning, both in one. The end